It reads, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart." It's the word of the Lord. So, in the 11th chapter preceding that, and in the weeks leading up to this morning, we've looked at Abraham, we've looked at Moses, we've looked at Noah, and we looked at the Israelites. And all of these were examples of people or groups with just great faith that we can look to in times either of great faith. We need examples of people who live out their faith joyfully, and then people who live through and endure great hardships or trials in their faith. But today, we're talking about the great cloud of witnesses. And that's who the author of Hebrews was, when he was listing all of these examples of faith, or heroes of the faith, or giants of the faith. That's what he meant by this cloud of witnesses. And we all have our own cloud of witnesses that surrounds us in our own life. We weren't fortunate enough to meet Abraham or Noah or Moses or any of the other ones listed, but we have our own cloud of witnesses that surrounds us and guides us in our faith, motivates us to endure, and just helps us along the way. And I'm sure if I gave us all time, we could spend at least an hour talking about the heroes of the faith in our life, our own cloud of witnesses. And it's helpful to think of all of those people, whether living or dead, that just surround us and keep us in their care, whether it's through prayer, whether it's through words, whether it's through helping us physically through something. But the next part of that verse, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. If we just let that soak in, it's a rather, it's a call to act. Throw off everything that hinders, the sin that also easily entangles. We're working our way up to Holy Week, which we remember and walk through and celebrate and live out Jesus' journey to the cross. And if we put that in conversation with this piece of verse, it really shows us what it means to throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Because if we look at Jesus' journey, he starts off, we are celebrating Palm Sunday on Sunday, and Jesus' triumphal entry where everyone is cheering and shouting Hosanna and just so excited to have Jesus come to town. Yet by the end of the week, he will be naked and hanging on a cross. He will have nothing. He will have laid everything aside. He'd thrown off everything, from having his clothing gambled away to carrying the cross. So he focused in on the journey. That's fine. We just started. No worries. So we focus in, and that's part of one of the ways that we are able to kind of throw off everything that hinders us. is when we focus on what it is that really matters. When we focus in our faith on Christ, who made this journey to the cross so that we could have eternal life. We have a singular purpose. We're able to persevere when we know our purpose, when we know our destination, when we know the goal. It's a whole lot more easy to accomplish that goal rather than when we're just kind of, well, I don't know really where I'm going or what I'm doing. When we have a goal, it's a whole lot easier to get there. So what this passage is calling us to do is remember all those people who are around us, supporting us, our cloud of witnesses, so that we can focus on the goal. And in focusing on that goal, we'll be able to, it'll take work, but we'll be able to throw off those things that hinder us and the sin that so easily entangles. And I love that word entangles because it's so appropriate for how sin just kind of weaves its way around us and we just get tangled up. I imagine, so growing up, and not to, it happens still, I'm very messy, as anybody who's walked into my office knows. And I had clothes everywhere in my bedroom growing up, and it drove my mom crazy. And one day, getting out of bed, totally got wrapped up in all of this clothes mess and just fell flat, just flat on my face, getting all wrapped up in this mess that I had created of clothing and whatnot, and had almost broken this jug that I had worked really hard to bring back with me from a trip. And I was like, oh my gosh, it made it through customs and this whole airplane journey, and here I'm gonna break it in my room by tripping over my mess of clothing. And I think sin is really similar. We create, oh, it's not that big of a deal if I just do this one thing. God will forgive me. Or if I just do this other thing. And then it eventually, we have this mess of sin that we inevitably get out of bed one day and just trip over, get entangled in and trip over. And we almost break that thing that's really precious to us. Whether that's our relationship with our families, or a goal that we've worked really hard to attain that we've almost shattered by forgetting what we're working for, or who knows. But it's so easy to create our own web of sin and get entangled. So the author of Hebrews encourages us in the next part, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. He's saying Christ has made this journey for us. That's what he means by the author and perfecter of our faith. Perfecter in the sense of it's been done. The path has been laid out before us. We just have to try to follow that path the best we can, and if we wander off the path, try to find our way back to that path. But if any of you have walked in the woods where it's not been cleared or a path hasn't been laid before you, it's treacherous almost. Branches come out of nowhere, and there are stones and all sorts of things that befall us. But if we tread the path that's been tread by many before us, it's a little easier going. Not to say that there aren't dangers and roots and whatnot on that journey as well. But verse 2, let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, So he knew the joy that was on the other side. So he bore the cross, not without feeling abandoned, because on the cross his last words were, my God, why have you forsaken me?" So it's not that he didn't feel the suffering or the pain, but he did it because he had a greater goal in mind. So if we can rise above our own kind of entanglement, our own mess of sin, and focus on that goal, it makes the journey that much more joyful. But there's a problem. If we focus on kind of the wrong part of the goal, we can get into trouble. Because it's really easy for me or anyone to say, well, this is how faith should be done. And I can get really angry and really frustrated and really exclusive for if you don't believe exactly the way I do, or if you don't live out your faith exactly the way that I believe that you should live it out, we can get into a lot of trouble. Suicide bombers are incredibly faithful people. They're living out their faith to the point of they're willing to kill themselves. But they're harming so many other people in the process. But if we focus on the part of Jesus' call to love our neighbor, to love ourselves, and to love our God, most importantly, then we won't harm as many people along the way. We'll harm a few just because we're human and we're broken, and that's life. So we ask forgiveness and we mend relationships. But if we focus on the wrong part of faith, like having to do faith correctly, then we miss kind of the bigger message. Because always having to be right is a huge burden. It causes a lot of stress and a lot of poor reactions in people. So if we can focus on love, and Christ's act on the cross is kind of the ultimate act of love. He didn't do this because he was like, yes, I get to hang on a cross and die, because that would be weird. He did it because he loved his creation. He loved his neighbor and he loved his God so much that he gave and gave and gave so that we can have a better life, so that we can take our cares and our troubles and that mess of sin we've created around ourselves and lay it at the foot of the cross. And so that we can have this cloud of witnesses that surrounds us and lifts us up and reminds us that you are a beloved child of God. And nothing you can do can separate you from that love. You can choose to walk away from it, choose to deny it, but God loves you. And God is waiting for you to just turn towards God and say, I can't carry this